So last year, I made a few videos about one of my favorite games, Dark Souls 2, and as part of that, I briefly showed this game as an example of a good movement system. But it was just footage. All anyone saw was some pixelated guy in sunglasses flipping around and throwing hands at a trilobite sand monster. I left everyone wondering what exactly this game is, and so I think it's finally time I clear the air and share with you a great game that has been a special fascination of mine for years. This is Street Fighter 2010: The Final Fight, a futuristic sci-fi themed Street Fighter spin-off released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1990, set in the far-off, speculative future year of 2010. Now, how I first discovered this game wasn't exactly typical. By the time I was of an age coherent enough to play video games, I was playing on the likes of the original Xbox and the Game Boy Advance. My dad had an NES, but for most of my childhood, it remained hidden in a closet somewhere until I was about 13, at which point it was brought out into our family game room along with my dad's small collection of sports titles. While these were good fun, I wanted to start finding my own games, and there was one that was very firmly at the top of my list. I'd heard about it in a way that I think a lot of people of my generation first learned about games from that time, via an episode of James Rolfe's Angry Video Game Nerd.
Play some games? Wanna play some shitty games? Well, hang on just a second. I gotta go get my mail. What the hell's all this shit?
I love this series. James's passion for not just video games, but for filmmaking shined through plainly in every video. For me, as a kid, the nerd was simply inspiring, and his Street Fighter 2010 episode was one I rewatched frequently. Unfortunately, while he does acknowledge the game's quality in the episode, the nature of the nerd as a character meant that he had to be angry. So the more negative aspects of the game, such as its brutal difficulty and lack of connection to the rest of the Street Fighter franchise, were highlighted disproportionately. People who grew up playing it had their frustrations validated, and many newer gamers were left with the assumption that this game probably wasn't worth picking up. But I was lucky enough to see it from a different perspective. I saw it through the thoughtless and impressionable eyes of a child. My interest had been piqued, and even into adulthood, it hasn't been able to escape my mind. Many of my early videos on this channel were even dedicated to or inspired by it in one way or another. So today, I want to dive into Street Fighter 2010, uncover the secrets it holds, and explore why I believe it to be not only one of the best titles on the NES, but one of the greatest games of all time. For the sake of fairness, I first want to acknowledge that this game isn't without its problems, and its very biggest one isn't hard to spot. It's right there in the title. It's called Street Fighter, but it clearly isn't. It's an action side-scroller more akin to another Capcom series, Mega Man. Except that's still not quite it. I'd say the category that best suits it is a platform beat-em-up. Think Subspace Emissary from Smash Bros., or the first Game Boy Advance Ninja Turtles game. Growing up, I never had much exposure to Street Fighter, or to the tournament fighter genre in general, so the detail of it simply being different wasn't enough to bother me. If anything, it was a lot closer to the games I was used to. But it certainly bothered Capcom USA when it came time to publish it for a North American release. And their solution was to totally double down. The English localization takes special care to assure us that yes, this is a Street Fighter game. When we look at the Japanese title, Street Fighter is a subtitle, indicating the game's status as a spin-off. But here, it's front and center. I can't imagine what drove them to this decision. When you think about it, it makes no sense. Street Fighter 1 was the only other game in the series in 1990, technically making this the second Street Fighter game. The series didn't even really catch on until the release of the real Street Fighter 2 a year later. They could have easily advertised it as something entirely new and seen just as much success. The name of the game's protagonist even differs between versions, with Kevin Straker in Japan and Ken in North America, so the story ties in with the original Street Fighter. It's ridiculous, but honestly, the story is pretty good. You take control of Kevin/Ken, who, since retiring from fighting, works in scientific research. Until one day, his lab partner is killed and their invention, a powerful symbiote called cyboplasm, was stolen and spread across the galaxy. Ken now has no choice but to step back into his old ways as a skilled martial artist, now equipped with the bionic enhancements necessary to locate and bring the killer to justice. Throughout the game, you'll travel to multiple alien worlds following the trail of cyboplasm-infected monsters that the killer left in their wake. The story takes many twists and turns, complete with these vibrant, cinematic cutscenes. Sure, the dialogue sounds like if an episode of Star Trek Season 3 was put through Google Translate a couple times, but that's exactly what it needs to be, and honestly, it's not far off. This is a Japanese game inspired by Western science fiction. The campiness of the writing and the stellar visual presentation of the story work together just right to make you feel like you've stepped into a comic book from that era. It's also very Star Trek of them to beam down the important scientist onto all these planets instead of somebody actually trained for combat. Like, sure, you used to be good at boxing, why don't you take this weaponized spacesuit and go on this whole mission by yourself? But hey, it works for Trek, and it works just as well here. Except wait. In the Japanese version, the story is completely different. Kevin Straker may as well be a completely separate character to Ken. He isn't a scientist at all, he's essentially a Blade Runner. Before the events of the game, his job was to hunt down cyborgs until alien-human hybrids called parasites started popping up as well. There was no cyboplasm. The game's planet-to-planet boss rush format is supposed to emulate the life of this bounty hunter who works for the police, much like Rick Deckard in Blade Runner. There's a rumor that the English version was actually developed first, and the Japanese release was the translation, but the evidence that's always cited to back up this claim is far from conclusive, and based on how much better the Japanese story fits the game, and the fact it was released first, I personally don't believe that to be true. The likely explanation is that the original Japanese version that the English localization was based on did have slightly more in common with the English version we wound up with, but they each made their own respective changes at the end of development and wound up with the two different stories. It's pretty much the same game either way, but it definitely feels as though the story was never supposed to be an aimless trot around the galaxy. Instead, it's Blade Runner. And it's Star Trek. And Star Wars. And Alien, and Dune. Hell, I'd be shocked if Ken's attacks weren't inspired by the discs in Tron. It's all the best sci-fi from its time, masterfully woven together to make something singular that stands out from the crowd. In both versions, it still does all the right things to pull you into its inspired universe. And boy, you're going to be having a blast while you're here. Taking control of Ken feels incredible once you understand his arsenal. When you're first dropped in, the controls seem more or less straightforward. You move with the D-pad, jump with A, and attack with B. You'll also quickly notice these power-ups that extend the range of your attacks. However, once you try to actually fight anything, it'll be painfully obvious that Ken's plasma punch attacks are anything but standard. This can get pretty techy at times, so for anything complicated, you'll see this indicator at the bottom left corner. Traversal is simple enough. In addition to jumping, you can press down and A to drop to a lower ledge. You can also ledge grab by pressing up midair in front of a ledge. This is only necessary once or twice throughout the game, but it's important to learn so you're not thrown off when you need to do it. Pressing A in the air next to a wall will have Ken grab that wall. From here, you can jump, climb up and down, and perform light attacks. Attacking on the ground is where things start to get interesting. First off, you can attack while walking. Rapidly tapping B without holding a direction, or while pressing up on the D-pad, performs light attacks. And holding left, right, or down while pressing B performs slower but more powerful heavy attacks. These projectiles have the added bonus of curving in an arc that extends into figure 8-like patterns at full power-up, allowing you to hit enemies positioned at odd angles from wherever Ken is standing. Continuously performing heavy attacks in the same direction will cycle through a range of punches, kicks, and uppercuts that each have their own unique pattern. Sometimes you'll want to repeat the same move several times in a row, and to do this you can simply let go of the D-pad and quickly press it back down to reset the combo at whichever moment you choose. Mastery of these moves and knowing when to use each will make Ken feel like a tank, feet planted firmly on the ground, but shoulders still swinging his weight around to put all that power into his punches. And at full power up, you'll feel untouchable as you hurl projectiles all over the screen. But don't think Ken is strictly grounded. At first, you might be mistaken in thinking his options for airborne attacks are quite restrictive, but in reality, this is where the combat truly opens up. The one way you might feel limited is when you want to attack in midair, as you can only fire off one shot per jump. But it's good to know that these attacks deal the same amount of damage as a heavy attack, so make them count. It's also important to be hyper-aware of which direction Ken is facing, for a couple of reasons. The first being that Ken performs vertical light attacks slightly off-center, so if you want to aim properly, you'll have to be looking the right way. The second reason being, if you press the D-pad in your back-facing direction, right after pressing A, backflip. This is going to be your most important tool. You can backflip in place or use it for traversal. You can even delay your backflips, or redirect them to send you moving forward again. Honestly, you'll probably be flipping just as much as jumping normally, because backflips have invincibility frames, just like dodge rolling in a Souls-like. Except you have a lot of them. As long as Ken isn't fully right side up, he can phase through just about anything. But that's not all. When you're at the apex of the flip, pressing B will fire a heavy shot directly underneath you. Being able to deal damage while invincible is insanely overpowered, so go ahead and abuse this at every chance you get. Ken will also flip indefinitely until you either land or shoot, so you can pull off tricks like this. Yeah, that doesn't come in handy at all, but it's cool. Also, listen to this. Yeah, something broke down there. I don't know. But that backflip gets even better. Ken can also utilize 2 different utility items throughout his adventure. These are very rare and only appear in a few specific breakables throughout the game, so you'll want to familiarize yourself with their locations. The first of these you'll find is the back-mounted capsule, which follows directly behind Ken at all times. This comes in handy whenever you've got enemies in all directions, or you want to do some extra damage while in a flip. The drawback with this is, once it's entered an enemy's hitbox, it can't deal damage continuously. As soon as it deals damage once, that enemy will be shielded from it for every frame until the ball leaves its hitbox. To get around this, there's a technique commonly used by speedrunners that can actually deal the highest DPS of anything in the game. It involves rocking the D-pad back and forth so the ball can quickly leave and re-enter the enemy's hitbox in rapid succession. But there's a problem. In order for this to be viable, you have to do it really fast. And because this is a short-range attack, it is extremely difficult to adjust your distance to the enemy at that speed. The second of these items is the Flip Shield Capsule, which is less of a shield and more of an energy kick that Ken performs automatically whenever you do a flip. So that's 3 opportunities for damage when you're in the air, and that can be used during your flip's iframes. Once you have these items, you really don't want to die, because you'll lose them both and all your power up if you do. For this reason, paired with the fact that you can't lose more than 60% of your maximum power up by just taking damage, deathless runs are almost easier in this game. Now, I would not recommend doing that on a first playthrough. There's no penalty for running out of lives, and there's unlimited continues. Using that trial and error is essential to learn the stages, memorize the locations of power-ups, and get you through your first playthrough. Because, have I not mentioned, this game is hard. Like, really, that wasn't words, but that's the take I'm using. It was supposed to be brutally hard, but you could continue with the video. But apart from a couple exceptions, it's also fair, unlike other difficult games on the system. Every enemy is designed to challenge Ken in a different way, so mastery of his arsenal is very rewarding. In terms of enemy quality and variety, this game is unparalleled on the NES. Even though they make me want to rip my hair out at times, I have to admit that the enemies in this game are impeccably well designed, both gameplay-wise and visually. Speaking of visuals, check out the graphics. For NES, this is actually quite impressive. I'd say it's not the best of the best on the system when compared to other late releases, but it's certainly up there. It's a significant step up from earlier Capcom games, to say the least. But the visuals wouldn't be nearly as impressive if it wasn't for the incredible art direction. We We've got high-tech laboratories, overgrown alien forests, biomechanical interiors, and cyberpunk cities that you can literally see burning down in the background. And the music! Back to back to back bangers. There's rock ballads, intense boss music, atonal psychedelic tracks, and heroic symphonies to accompany all that ass-kicking. The only drawback is the hardware of the NES itself. Instrument tracks go quiet when sound effects play, and the game grinds to a crawl when too many objects are on screen. The game has so much aura that not even its own console can contain it. I wrote that part when I was high, but I still think it's cool, so I'm gonna still say it. I'm gonna keep it in. Those slowdowns get particularly cumbersome when you're trying to speedrun. That's right, once you're able to beat the game without dying, then the real challenge begins. Learning to speedrun this game was some of the most fun I've had playing a video game, and that's saying something. Since this game is mostly a boss rush, and a lot of your traditional side-scrolling stages are auto-scrollers, there's very little margin for error. At a certain point, it's just about pure refinement, preventing those slowdowns and dealing damage as quickly as possible. A couple years ago, I was able to get as good as 8th, but have since been bumped to 9th, and I'd encourage anyone watching to try to beat that as well. The biggest thing holding me back are the mummies. They spawn spouts of gas from the ground very quickly and with a pattern that's not easy to follow. You can fight them by latching onto the walls to avoid this, but that's significantly slower. You just have to go for it, and more often than not, you'll die and have to start your run over. And that's not just for the mummies. I have a similar problem with this guy. Electric Tommy. Okay, I think it's time I explain where I'm getting these names from. For some reason, the English release only got a very basic black and white manual, while Japan got a full-color 26-page booklet that might as well be a strategy guide. With the help of this user on Reddit, thanks bro, I was able to find a high-quality scan of the Japanese manual, and I put each page through Google Translate. This direct translation seems to be more or less accurate to what I understand about the game, but the names of the enemies are different from the names of the few that appear in the English manual. The hunter drone is called Apple Rabbit, and the basher is called Brian. The funniest oddity with this is the naming of the planets. Tatooine and Dagobah, and they're backwards. Was swapping the names really enough to avoid copyright issues? And what about... I love this artwork though. Really great depictions of the different areas you explore in the game. Makes me wonder if this was concept art. Makes me wonder who the artist is. Who designed any of this stuff? Unfortunately, this was made at a time when Japanese developers were not properly credited. Credits only appear in the Japanese version of the game, and even then, all we get are aliases. This was part of Capcom's company policy at the time, so this is far from the only game that suffers this issue. Based on aliases from other games, fans were able to deduce that the composer was Junko Tamiya, and the producer was Teruko Fujiwara, but the identities of any of the other developers are anyone's guess. If anyone has any ideas, go ahead and leave it in the comments. I'm dying to see more art like this. I feel very similarly about this game to how I feel about the last game I made a video like this about. For a long time, I let myself believe that this was just a me thing. No one I knew ever heard about it, and trying to convince people to try it was even more impossible than beating it. I couldn't explain why it was good because it actually wasn't. Why I like it doesn't matter, it doesn't need explanation. I just like it. But I know there's more to it than that. I know this game is good. And honestly, the fact of it being so unappreciated might have indirectly been part of why I wound up loving it so much. It gave me time to think about it to myself and reaffirm why I love it so much, and so I kept going back again and again. It's interesting how back then, consumers were complaining about the same things we are now, namely an oversaturation of games. This game was overlooked at the time because in that market, it was seen as a cheap cash grab. But we should never dismiss a piece of art simply because of the environment it came from. A game can be a clear product of its time while still being a masterpiece. Same goes for movies or music. And with an abundance of games comes variety. There's a game for every niche, for every player to call their favorite. So if this video does anything for you, I hope it encourages you to go out and find out what that thing is for you. We're fading out. This is a goodbye, this is a fading. Wait, we're fading back in. Wait, we're back. How you doing? That's right. There's a secret part of the video that was at the end after the fade out. Don't you love when that happens? Too bad I didn't actually write anything for that to happen. I'm improvising that on the spot. So, what do you want to talk about? I'm waiting for you to actually just say something. Like you sitting at your computer screen. This is gonna be like a Dora the Explorer type situation where like you have to like talk to the screen. That's why I waited for that second. That wasn't like a dramatic pause. That was me waiting for you to actually say something. So you sitting in front of your computer, say it to your computer screen or your phone screen or your TV. Where nobody watches YouTube on their TV. That's a lie. I do sometimes. I think I'm just like, I read the whole script, and now at this point, I'm just like, I just want to keep talking. But I think if I do keep talking, my voice is just going to break. It's just going to destroy itself. It's not going to destroy other people. Or maybe it will. Bah! Did I get you? We're done here.